Alright, we're actually, like I said, close to finishing the end of the game, but this part and the next will be dedicated to finish the optional stuff that we have before reaching, the proper end of the game. So, let's do, now that we are properly fully upgraded, the missions from the past. So, basically, both this and the next part are basically Celebrimbor telling how big his dick was, once again.
Oh god, and the flashbacks are still smeared in Vaseline.
Yeah, because of that. That being
I
said,
love
I
it.
liked most of these challenges.
Oh yeah, they're good.
Normally in games like these, like say Assassin's Creed or the Batman Arkham games, I don't normally do all of these because usually maybe the reward is not worth it or they're very painful in what they want you to do. Um, but these ones are okay. I found only one or two that might be legitimately be annoying or too stressful. But for the ratio and everything, I argue it's actually good enough to me compared to the competition. So there is that.
You know, it says
Um,
something that the game actually looks better when you're doing the ghost effect because then that cancels out the Vaseline.
for this mission, Celebrimbor had to instill the fear into the orcs that he slaughter left and right, and as such he has to terrorize them. It's the best thing that you can do with that is, of course, brutalization.
So I forget if we've
Yes.
played as Celebrimbor before in this game specifically.
Yes,
Remind
I
me.
showcased a few. The moveset is basically identical, so don't worry about potential differences.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
And thus, now I will tell you the story of the first orc I shamed. My insults were a bit rough at first. I had to improve them. I just basically told him that his dad hated him and his mom's a whore. And yeah, that wasn't particularly clever and witty. I need to think of better ones.
I
I mean,
mean,
gotta
if
go
we,
with the classics. It worked in Sly 3.
I guess if we think of Sauron and Saruman as the mom and dad, okay.
Well, remember, Saruman at
Maybe.
this point was not yet evil, so Second Age and everything. I don't even think the Istari had showed up at this point
So that
in
means that at
time.
this point these orcs are all natural, as opposed to being
And yeah,
generated.
again, some of these missions have you in order to rat out a particular captain that the mission tells you that you're supposed to brand.
Sir, can you help us out? I can't see around me. There's
I
Vaseline
think
all over my eyes.
when it comes to these missions, I think the orc that you're supposed to brand is actually, always the same, but his bodyguards are randomly generated instead. So there is that.
I forget what's the point of Celebrimbor having a ghost phase in this one, seeing as how usually the idea with Talion is to, show the two are linked, whereas here, I don't think Celebrimbor needs the ghostly thing, though I
It's
wouldn't be
because
surprised if that's...
he's a second age elf, and if I recall correctly, it's related also to the family of Galadriel. So he has basically a bit of more of an advantage. Our field of reference was not much in the movies, but remember, the fact that Legolas is just has scary Stewish powers, but at the end of the day, he's just very good with bow and arrow is because he's part of a wood elves, which are basically an offshoot. One is oh,
You think you're the stuff of nightmares?
It's kind of awkward, given that we're hanging from a flag when he gives the speech.
Bad dreams. I consume lesser fears, and I become fear itself.
I mean that was an interesting Marvel event, but no. But instead, Eldrond had a bit of clairvoyancy, being still related to the High Elves as the actual sense of Erendil. So there is that. But as a general rule of thought, the higher in power the elves are, the more the bigger power potentially they have. Not to rival the ones of the gods, but very effective. This is mostly because, again, they were part of the first major creations of the world, and as a result, also they kind of needed to be tough in order to fight the horrors of Morgoth.
But
There
of
is that.
course,
Shank. Again, the bonus objective for the mission is to kill also the bodyguards, so what I had to do. And now, besides, it makes things easier in order to recruit the orc.
This is a story, Talion, of how I no-scoped this pleb.
Hi.
But, sir, I don't know. I could. Okay, sir, why'd you put Vaseline all over the screen with your visions of the
For
past?
dramatic effect, shut up.
Dramatic effect, yes. It will be genius in how the audience can barely see it without getting a headache.
It's not the PS3 level of bloom effect, thankfully, but
It is
close,
an
I guess.
eyesore.
It's a nice touch, though, that the ghost effect for past Celebrimbor does not have all the wrinkles on his face, but you know, it's just the same as his.
You got 500 thingies, a skill
Currency.
point, and a
In-game
red
currency.
gem.
Getting good.
It's
Kind of like
just getting good.
think of them kind of like the souls in Dark Souls. You know, they represent basically the currency, but they might not explicitly be a form of currency.
The Fear Eater was mine, and I could use that fear to rule the other orcs. But fear has its limits as a motivator. Sometimes more subtle manipulations are required.
Yeah, basically after each of these missions, Celebrimbor basically tells those you are so what have we learned today kind of moral.
Celebrimbor knew it would be.
Cannas is our
And it's also the fact that each story of these missions is connected to an elven word, and Celebrimbor usually starts by saying it, you know, what the meaning could be.
I love
This
the
if I
way.
go directly is get a higher position and start sniping the shit out of everyone. Go on, Dweebs.
I love how in some of the missions, after you did the narration, you immediately cut to you winning. So it's basically, I can imagine the ghost guy saying, "This is how I did it," and then I won.
And again, this is another one where it's best encouraged for you to use the Breath of the Wild, you know, bow and arrow trick.
Nice.
Come on. No. God damn it.
Oh, I guess physics wasn't on his side there.
But hey, you completed the mission.
I still did it, technically. So yeah.
3
fuck it,
check
fuck
marks
that.
and everything.
Oh, fuck it. We take those kind of wins.
When the One Ring slipped from my finger and onto Sauron's, I learned how little bravery.
And I'm sure you learned a valuable lesson that day, Celebrimbor.
I shall leave
Wasn't that kind of the idea last time? Only, you know.
Don't let him know, Jova. It's hilarious this way.
Again, I love how elves always talk this high crap, but then just end up looking all the more doofuses for it.
Afadad, the virtue of obedience. Then, as now, raising an army in Mordor meant overwhelming.
Not to say all elves in Mordor are like that, but man, the high and mighty ones have such the stick up their ass.
It's also more of a case that by the time of the War of the Ring, you know, most of the elves decide to just fuck off instead of actually fighting.
Because
that's already, you know, a thing.
They're pussies. I mean, come on, they're all powerful wise elves, and they just run off. They're cowards.
And
It's more like they generally the general thought process was that they thought it was the end time one way or another, so they wanted to save whatever they had. But yeah, oops, did nothing to see here.
it'll be fine.
The narrative that Tolkien was going for was, you know, the idea that the fourth age is supposed to be the age of man, and as a result, you know, most of the fantastical stuff of Middle Earth gradually start going away, and the elves are a big part of that. But I don't know. I agree that it could have been handled better. Like say, oh, you know, they were again already. Elrond provided a better narrative by saying, you know, that they were too little to actually do something effective. You know.
And the thing is, the forest elves are actually much more helpful in the original trilogy, which is ironic.
Well, Well, when it comes to the movies, remember, in the books, no elves actually show up from Lothlorien at the Battle of Helm's Deep. It's all men for themselves. Again, you only get a throwaway line from Legolas when says, "Oh, how do I wish that we did had, 100 of my companion here at my side, but alas, we can't."
So I guess the Forest Elves were sort of an offer saving throw in the movie adaptation.
Or I wouldn't call that because, like I said, I think they were not a good call one way or another. Even before the whole debacle about should have been Arwen or someone else leading them or not.
I guess
Again, the entire point of Lord of the Rings also as a story on its own is to showcase the fact that men are not as weak as thought, So it kind of deprives a bit of that.
I guess for me, I just like that the Forest Elves were elves that, weren't assholes, unlike almost every other faction of elves.
That's also the thing, Job. Okay, to be fair, that's Lothlorien. But when it comes to, remember, when it comes to instead of the ones of Mirkwood, Legolas is kind of the exception because his father Thranduil and his cohort are instead supposed to be basically assholes.
That's the funny thing. In the Hobbit trilogy, it's reversed where the Forest Elves are the assholes and the asshole
like
elves.
Said, that's how they are in the book.
And yet, ironically,
Perhaps the highest.
the asshole elves from the original trilogy are actually the nice elves at that point, which I guess was to show how different the times were.
Also,
Yeah,
I love how we
Gone.
I love how we see every time we go around the front and see the main protagonist's face. He always looks like he just got woke up at 2 a.m.
Like I said, for all, despite being on a on a next gen, by the time it was made, kind of set of consoles, Talion still retains the classic, generic Xbox 360 shooter protagonist kind of set. Middle-aged, white guy with an unshaven beard, and then small and short haircut.
Someone drank my beer in front of me. Do we know if we're getting any more of these games?
Not really. I think I mentioned a few parts ago, but might as well repeat that. Remember, by this time, the studio that made this Monolith, no, not Monolith Soft, another Monolith, is currently doing the Wonder Woman video game, which I think, I hope it actually turns out to be good, as long as we can see that. Looking forward to when this gets published by the fact that maybe a new trailer has dropped by that point.
Yeah.
And
I'm
instead...
sorry.
And instead, the license for Lord of the Rings properties has been being juggled a bit. That's why we got stuff like, for example, the Gollum game, or are we getting the Mines of Moria video game more recently. So the Embracer Group is essentially nowadays allowing. So if I recall correctly, it's more of a thing that Warner Bros. Can use it, So it's not in a risk of losing it, but it's not a thing that they can keep for themselves. Yes, Pedro?
I'm also interested to see what mode of the developers of the Dead Space remake are doing with their single-player Marvel's Iron Man game.
Isn't that a VR exclusive?
Oh no, that's another. That one came out years ago too. This is.
Right. No. I get what you mean now. Okay.
It's from the developers of the Dead Space remake.
Congratulated myself for my foresight, but Sauron's vision exceeded mine, for he made a ring that would dominate all the others. Never again. Now we
I made the I win ring.
Basically, that's the idea, at least in mind.
Yeah, I made the one ring to rule the one ring.
We'll have to see how that performs overall.
When I made war on Sauron, many war chiefs flocked to my banner. Among the most useful, though not the most subtle, was the Grog.
Oh, great! Another drunkard.
Terror in battle, and child's play to manipulate.
But yeah, when you complete most, if I recall correctly, all of the ghost missions in a region, the last one that you unlock is the one about how Celebrimbor recruited a particular orc captain, specifically from that fortress. So that's actually pretty cool as a sort of a capping off that.
Yeah, just make a ring where every time you go into battle, or while you're wearing it, all you have to do is clap, and then you've instantly won the battle.
Well, it doesn't really work like that. But in that kind of sense, you would like, on a story perspective, the Myth series, which was done by Bungie as RTSs, because that one does contain magical artifacts that kind of sort of do like that. like the sword Balmung, which just raising the end a bit and an entire platoon gets zapped by lightning and instantly dies. So yeah,
Do we?
shame
Have we?
it's the villain that uses that.
Yeah. Has this franchise ever established the limits of what you can do with a ring when you've made it?
Okay, it's a bit complicated because while they are labeled rings of power, the things that they allow you to do vary depending on who you are. Remember, Celebrimbor technically did help Sauron making them. Potentially, they might be enhancement boosters of potentially the capacity, not necessarily combat, but potential artisan skills, for example, like in the case of the dwarves, for example. Sauron did infuse the side effects in order to actually have the ring either backfires or, still push the leaders of the different species of Middle-earth to his side. For example, in the dwarves, it was not enough to corrupt them like it happened with the Kings of Man, but it enhances a lot their greed to the point of actually making them also very ineffective. That's why they did not fight much during the Second War, because they were busy either reorganizing themselves, and unfortunately, because they were living mostly in the north, they attracted the attention of the remaining dragons of the game, the remaining dragons of Middle-earth that remained, and most of the rings of power of the dwarves got melted because of that. From that.
So you can't just make a fucking ring.
Not really. That was the idea of the one ring that Sauron had. He was just not counting on Isildur doing a last second, stand over his father's corpse. Basically, it's very complicated, and also connected to the fall of Numenor. Essentially, the Rings of Power did give a tease to that, but if I recall correctly, this very year, when we're recording this, 2023, the fall of Numenor, hold on.
I'm gonna stomp you into the mud. Then, I'm gonna stomp on you some more. And then, I'll have myself a drink. I got nothing to say. Well,
Okay then. Essentially, if I recall correctly, that book telling specifically that event is to be released. Essentially, while Sauron's presence was known by the time of the Second Age, he knew that he was not probably in good shape to actually, face directly the forces of all the other races, because by the time his gig was up when it came to the Rings of Power, but the Númenóreans were basically left untouched for the most part. You have to think the Númenóreans as boosted regular men. Think of them kind of like the city of Atlantis, knowing superior technology and potentially having, a longer lifespan because of the heritage and stuff. So Sauron decided to play the long game. He faked resigning, decided to let willingly be prisoner, kind of be like Loki in the first Avengers movie, to give a more direct example. And in time, they managed to give enough of a good conduct to enter the graces of the kings of Numenor and became, basically Jafar, instilling words of doubt in them, and in order to really convince him downfall by using a particular gambling trick that involves also the mythology of the seas, of Middle-earth. Long story short, the gods live in a particular region far in the west, the one where, Frodo and the others on the boat go at the very end of Return of the King. But the major rule is that no living being can go there unless specific conditions, Otherwise, you're basically doing an affront to the gods. Sauron convinced the King of Numenor that was bullshit and he should try it. See what happens. Result, the entire city of Numenor got submerged, again, kind of like Atlantis. Most of Numenor resigned to retreat and never managed to retain their glory. The only punishment that Sauron got from that is that he could not use anymore his trickster form, but was stuck in the permanent RP armor. So there is that. Which is something that this game ignores, unfortunately, but what can you do?
Right, this is supposed to, well, okay, the flashback scenes we see of him are supposed to be after that point, aren't they?
That is true, but again, well, not extent. We have seen, if I recall correctly, one or two scenes where Sauron is present in his Maiar form. it's tricky. Like I said, the devs wisely did preemptively said that this will diverge from canon as to be counted as an alternate timeline, where still the events of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit still follow through, but some things are particularly different that they're not have to be considered canon to the source material on a direct state. Again, if you're a fan of stuff like, the expanded universe of Star Wars or the gajillion books that were made for Star Trek, you know exactly the kind of deal this is.
To be fair to the Sauron thing, if we assume that those flashbacks where we see him in that form are before that point he was locked in, then that's fair game. And while they did give that aside, it does seem like they're leaning more towards, yeah, this is canon, since they even went as far as to explain why Shelob acts the way she does here and why she acted the way she did in the third movie, as in her motivations in the third movie was that she was actually trying to scare Sam and Frodo into...
Oh no, she still wanted to eat them. My reasoning for that was that is by the time of Return of the King, she's basically too weak, too old, and potentially too frail to actually put up a decent warfare, and she's just content in eating orcs that wander casually around in Kungol.
Oh, I get that, but the devs actually tried to come up with a reason for why she acts like that. And their reasoning was that, well, she wasn't actually trying to kill Sam and Frodo, she was trying to scare and motivate them towards the end goal to help them on their journey all the more. So much so that she was even willing to sacrifice herself when Sam mortally wounds her, which is...
Wow, talk about depriving Sam of his victory. Oh no, don't you see? He did not manage to accomplish that. She allowed him to do that. That's what fans want to hear.
Like,
of course.
I think what I laugh at the most is the idea that, oh no, she was just scaring them towards the goal. Oh yeah, she really scared Frodo when she,
they were not even supposed to get there. Gollum actually tricked them to go there. God, that's so bullshit. Not to mention, they literally brought two things that she was allergic at. The Light of Arendil, which an artifact of the First Age, that two artifacts of the First Age, the Light of Arendil, which is basically like a combination of radiation poisoning to her and an intense flashlight, and an actual Gondolian sword, which, is not your average steel stick.
There was, also, in regards to her scaring Frodo, yeah, she definitely scared him when she poisoned him.
Like, if that's the justification of why she did not outright kill him, but just, stabbed him and put him into webs, that really doesn't add up.
That was the bit where the filmmakers forgot Frodo had that.
No, actually, Lives. Like I said, the meteor mail is actually good stuff, but not enough to actually resist that.
Well, that's the thing, though. In the book, apparently. That's the thing, though. In the book, apparently Frodo got stabbed in the neck.
Yes, technically he did, but again, judging again by similar to how in this game Shelob can turn into a human, it's something that the books did not explain, but it's perfectly reasonable in her powers.
Remember, she was technically the most powerful being out there at some point.
For reference, Mithril is not necessarily magical as a material in itself. It's essentially a mineral that the dwarves dug up, and it's very resistant and light at the same time. While instead, Shelob is essentially an Eldritch Horror that's more allergic to magical stuff. Like the sword, the stinger that Bilbo and then Frodo carried, which was actually elvish in nature.
When Sauron first showed me the One Ring, I could see it was imperfect. It took the utmost tenacity for me to refine it, and even more to craft the new ring.
The movie did not really had an occasion to. That would have been a good time potentially to explain everything. In some things, you just have to accept the things at face value, and if you know the extra layer to it, is that that makes sense.
What bade invade Mordor? Fireless, the virtue of justice. Sauron had betrayed me and my people, and I was determined.
And together we can be justice. Can you? The funny thing about that story, Jova, is that, believe it or not, I was actually a fan of the character of Prometheus before that. I actually thought he was actually a cool Batman villain.
Oh no!
Talk about ruining character assassination.
Trust me, Tio. You and plenty of people like. I mean, and the thing is, Prometheus it does still have his fans in spite of
Like,
Cry for
it
Justice.
was the villain that I really wish would show up in one of the Arkham games.
Yeah,
It
like
really would have made sense.
yeah, like no, the fallout was real. Like, and you know what? Again, Prometheus was actually a pretty popular villain for Batman because people saw him as legit the antithesis of Batman, literally down to the core that, oh, Batman was a rich boy who lost his parents to crime. Prometheus was, well, kind of a poor kid, son of
Street
criminals
thug.
who lost his parents to the law, so wanted to take vengeance on that.
Don't you see, Joe, but the real antithesis of Batman has to be harsh these days because my family or something, God.
I think they stopped with that, thankfully.
Well,
but,
Heart of Ash is still canon, and that story is really bullshit.
Oh, right, Heart of
Like,
Ash.
the first Ash I don't actually mind, and I prefer it much more in what they did with the animated adaptation, but that's a story for another time, you know.
I think...
But Heart of Ash is just a series of very bad retcons that really no one needed.
I think the big issue with Hush as a villain is, like, he's a one-trick pony. Once you know who he is and all that stuff, like, okay, he's Bruce's asshole doctor friend.
Is that it's not? It doesn't even have a particular, you know, gimmick or physical when it comes to physicality to him. Oh, he's supposed to be a doctor. Make him like have something like Scarecrow, but instead of actually having, you know, fear toxin, having be a set of other poison stuff. You know, a kind of bit like what Copperhead is supposed to be ideally. But no, it just has sometimes a gun.
Do you think they were pulling a meta?
riveting.
Do you think they were pulling a meta commentary with how much of a joke they made him in Arkham Knight? Like, all that build-up from City just to have him essentially get knocked out and punted out of Bruce's office.
I don't know, it just again, but I guess it's a downside when it comes to Batman's Rogues Gallery. There's already so much stuff and so much variety that something new like him probably would, you know, will enter low tier automatically.
Well, that's the
Yes,
deal. Like, well, when you're making a new Batman villain, you've got heavy pressure given, well, the big guns you're competing with. So people will try tried and true methods to make ones. And you know what? Sometimes we get real good ones like Prometheus. Sometimes we get the one-trick ponies who are good for, like, one story, but when they try and make them recurring, that's when it all goes downhill.
Not to mention, Joe, I'd like to remind you also that Arkham Knight is also the same game that basically gave a big middle finger to, what's it called?
Deacon
Batman the
Blackfire?
Cult. Yeah, Deacon Blackfire and Batman the Cult as a whole, which is actually one of the more interesting, you know, type of stories that you did with Batman. I had no idea why they did that. Sure, alternate continuity, so, you know, you can experiment with the character, but God, talk about lack of dignity.
Alas. Although granted,
Anyway,
a lot of villains did not exactly have their best showing in Arkham Knight.
that is, yes and no. Again, I don't mind what they did, for example, with Professor Pig. You have to remember, Grant Morrison's run with Batman is confusing a lot on its own. So honestly, what they did, they could have done so much worse with the character. What they did is fine, technically, and it's also an interesting set of different you know, type of missions where you have to actually use detective skills, you know, instead of just mindlessly beating everyone. Also, just to mention, this particular mission that I'm doing right now is one of the more dickish ones because the timer is absolutely not in your favor, and you're forced to kill a high number of ghouls. So you're supposed to not waste the barrels of the grog around in order to anyway supposed to use them to kill the large numbers of ghouls when possible. If I recall correctly, I still managed to make it by an inch.
Pretty much bathing them in fire there.
Yeah, because the real goal is not just eating destroying the group, but also the quote-unquote the infestation, which are basically hordes.
I'm imagining him telling this to his minions, and then I burn people here, and I burn people there, and I burn people all around me.
Still,
Damn, sir, you're brutal.
generally, aside from a couple of examples, like the ones we aforementioned, I don't really mind what Arkham Knight did to its set of villains. It could have been better in some cases, but it honestly could have been worse.
Even if it is not your own.
There you go. All right, next one. I think we're in Gorgorov.
All right then. The trickery.
They're dominating.
The tricky.
Yeah, like I said.
Most orcs are dullards, but the tricky had cleverness to spare. When we marched against Sauron, a war chief with such cunning was a most useful weapon indeed.
Okay, if I remember correctly, if it's not this, it's one of the ones that are coming. One of these missions, in terms of recruiting, one of the captains for Celebrimbor's purposes, is particularly dickish. Also with the bonus requirement, like I hinted, or you may have seen on screen, you're supposed to actually fulfill that if you want to actually have a gold ranking. So again, these are the kind of missions that actually, try to drive you insane, that I normally don't particularly care going after, or if so, taking small doses, because sometimes they really can test your patience. I just forgot if it's this one or one after. There we go. But no, honestly, there are still actually a lot of, Batman villains that the general public doesn't really know much. I forgot, did the animated series ever showcase Maxi Zeus?
Yes.
Okay. That one is one that really needs the spot sometimes, just for how stupidly insane it is.
Well, okay, so the animated series did one from Maxi Zeus. The Batman, the series, did have Maxi Zeus, and the Harley Quinn series features Maxi Zeus.
So I believe there is something at the very least. I was talking also generally more about the video games, but yeah.
You a fan of the character?
Again, when it comes to the Batman villains, you have a lot of things that you can choose, from. But aside from the more classic ones, which of course, I have their good reason to be as popular as we are, I try to see what the more obscure might be, and if they actually have, something that's worth shedding a spotlight on them. Again, people like Deacon Blackfire are basically one-shot villains, but they work really well for the stories that they have.
I legit hold to my theory that part of the main reason that Batman is so popular is just due to the fact that he has one of, if not the best rogues gallery that a superhero has gotten.
Well, I agree only to an extent, because they work on a psychological kind of thing, representing different kind of potential psychosis or manipulation kind of thing. I argue, at least personally, that the Flash has the best rogues gallery that's balanced in both personality and set of powers. Because in order to actually be effective against him, they also do need the component of being physical in some kind of manner. Even when it comes to, having to trick him, like Captain Boomerang or, Mirror Master.
I guess my guess is, like, when it comes to being, like, villain archetypes that revolutionize the genre and from which you see plenty of people take inspiration from, Batman is probably seen as, like, the widest net in that regard. I'd say that sort of is a bit similar for Spider-Man being legit the face of Marvel. Not to say that the character itself doesn't play a factor into that, but it's definitely quite a massive piece of the puzzle. Are these two twins or clones?
Like I said, Jova, not the twins technically, not just two. These are one of those captains that has the gimmick of having a bunch of mooks that are entirely stylized himself, as in dealing the same amount of damage, but at the same time, they are much more fragile. So they're there to confuse you with target, or you're supposed to, take them all out. There we go.
That's gonna leave a mark.
Like I said, this is Captain is labeled as the tricky, so that's why Celebrimbor decided to recruit him. Back for his campaign, he just wanted to have the best of the best. Ow. It's really a shame that because of all of the shenanigans that happened and the combination of, bad things. Characters, when it comes to other DC characters, like, both the Flash and Green Lantern, they never had the occasional showcasing the potential of their Rogues Gallery for Rogues Gallery, because, I had no idea what the 2000, despite me not really hating it that much at the end of the day, the 2011 movie still I have no idea what they wanted to do with Parallax, to be honest. And the less being said about the Flash, the better.
Now,
I think people have ranted enough about it.
I will say this, Superman definitely still earns and holds his credit as being not only the face of DC, but the archetype upon which superheroes are based on. In regards to his Rogues Gallery, I'm gonna say this, the animated series did a lot of heavy lifting and not only fine-tuning a lot of his villains to make them more fresh for him, but arguably the animated series may have been the biggest addition of completely new and original villains for him to finally get a good iconic roster.
Wire, what else did they add that became a staple?
Oh god, I forget the name, but there was that one villain who essentially is all light-based. It's not Dr. Light.
No, no, Black Lightning is actually a good guy. There we go.
There was...
go on. There was the episode where they managed to make Lobo work with a PG-13 kind of rating.
For kids, that was beautiful, honestly.
For reference, waves, because you probably don't know much about the character.
You picked the wrong Uruk. I'll eat your
Sure.
dead hearts.
For reference, waves, what you need to think about Lobo, the gore violence and swearing and not giving a single shit of Deadpool, inserted in an 80s biker. Yeah,
okay.
And he's a space biker to boot. It's kind of hilarious. Yes, okay, I forgot if he, whose was a villain, too, during his first appearance, when he had a very bad appearance, admittedly. But for Revamped one, he kind of went to do a bit his own thing. I think he clashed with the Teen Titans at some point.
Oh wait, was that around the time that he got turned into Kid Lobo, around that event where basically people who were adults got turned into kids and kids were turned into adults?
I remember that the Venus 52 tried to put a massive retcon and say, oh, the Lobo's appearance that you guys grew up with is so bad. This new, hip teen and, very more marketable Lobo is the real one. Very unsurprisingly, nobody liked that, and we had to re-retcon things to proper, like 1 or 2 years later. That was before the New 52 got canned.
Man.
So that takes a lot.
The New 52 era is just an amazing pocket in time to look back at.
Seeking ways to amuse themselves. Megras.
Check this out. These mission. Check how difficult this mission is. I'm supposed to actually, destroy, kill all of the ghouls, but what? 1, 2.
Come on. I'll go there. 3.
Hold on. Done.
I call this mission how I bitch slap the ghouls in 10 seconds.
This is, again, the difficulty just flip-flops all over the place for these ones.
How generous of them.
I created many wonders, and our precision was enhanced by the techniques Sauron taught us. Each collaboration brought us closer to perfection.
If this were a
then.
game like The Tales of Captain Jack Sparrow, I could actually totally see it as him talking up how great it was, and that's why it's easier there.
I guess it could also work with the idea that you're technically playing, but being Jack, they could be overly exaggerated.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of how that game goes.
That's kind of what happens in Secret Agent Clank. Occasionally, you cut back to Captain Park, which is doing essentially his own thing in that game. He's essentially releasing an interview about his memoir, because of course. and he's essentially recounting some of the stuff that he did in the locations that you visit, like a particular planet. But because he's Quark the narrator, the missions sometimes are very nonsensical or purposely over-exaggerated to the point that in one occasions where you're supposed to have a boss fight, it becomes out of nowhere incredibly cheap just because Quark said, "Oh, did I forgot to mention that this guy has laser eyes?" But immediately he has to actually refrain himself. Maybe not, because I might have been mistaken, because otherwise the fight would have been too hard. So that's actually pretty cute. In here, I just had to defeat the character, but yeah, Jova, no, I get what you mean. It's the fact that it's not even just bad. The fact that it's also the fact that the New 52 had to be the status quo of influencing the side products of DC that were going around the time. I think the only one that really was not affected by this, and for all the wrong reasons, was Teen Titans Go. And, like, wow.
Yes,
Talk
that
about
was
monkey's paw. But for example, the DC animated movies, as we started seeing, got influenced, and I still argue very bad because Justice League War keeps getting worse the more I think about it. Even Injustice to be based in a beating story and also in costume design based on that.
God. I like Injustice Gods Among Us, but I'm kind of annoyed that the designs that actually resembled the original continuity were on the evil side.
Well, not really. Remember, Regime Captain Marvel, or Shazam, as it's called, does have the cape with the hood from the New 52.
Yeah. But
I wouldn't
Batman...
expect you to remember much, because Superman murders him like if fucking Mark Millar took over out of nowhere to write the story.
Again, like, the reason I'm okay with that is because at least they allow the good Superman to be the one who saves the day. So, like, while they did have evil Superman, they at least canceled that out by having... Hell, even Batman admit that they needed Superman's help on this, as opposed to just going, no, Batman should just totally solve this all himself. Only he knows what is right, yada, yada, yada.
Doug Mullock style.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, no, I mean, I do like the first Injustice Gods Among Us game's narrative for the most part. The sequel, on the other hand, okay, I'm just gonna say this. Incredible missed opportunity to not have an ending where the two sides, reconcile after dealing with Brainiac.
No, right as Brainiac is being killed, we need to introduce a conflict that forces, Batman and Superman to actually having to take sides again. And with an ending that's really, and I argue either endings are very unsatisfying. Not to mention also the minor stuff that I noted over the passage of time. How the story completely gives the middle finger to Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy shippers. Not even in a sense of, not saying that they had a relationship, like say, because, alternate continuity. But no, but they saying that they had one, but Poison Ivy decided to become, instead truncate that because she decided to be more evil, even if that's not how it works. Just so stupid.
But yeah, the New 52. Like many things, it's easier to look back at it and laugh, but man, actually being in that time date, it was a time where people just didn't know, because I guess to their credit, Warner Brothers and DC definitely committed to the New 52 aesthetic. Like, it wasn't just the comics or the fact that the movies are reflecting them. We'd see it in games. We'd even see it in flipping theme parks when they redesigned the heroes to look more like their New 52 counterparts.
And part of me gets it. Oh, this is actually the mission. That's bullshit, but just to mention. And part of me gets it because at the end of the day, the New 52 was supposed to be a completely new relaunch, a fresh starting point for a new audience that could just pick up a comic book, without any baggage or continuity, and just freshly start off. That's actually, on paper, that's not too bad as an idea. Kind of like how the Ultimate Universe was conceived at the beginning of the 2000s for the Marvel side. Problem was basically the execution. The people involved, there was not much communication with the people involved with the New 52, and as a result, we got a gajillion problems, like having a fuck ton of crossover events out of nowhere, assuming people will know immediately the characters without having to read their solo series, or maybe the crossover events interjecting in their solo series in their very first couple of issues. Very bizarre rulings, like saying that Batman started 10 years before the start of the events of the universe, but everyone else showed up at the same time 5 years before that. Whatever the hell that means.
And it was
And
inconsistent.
and some stories that happened were the ones that were actually archive stories were supposed to happen in the main continuity, like Batman Incorporated or the Court of Owls.
Yep. Not only that, you had some stories that felt like they legit just picked up where the original stories had left off here. Batman was for the most part intact, and yet ironically, he was one of the more upbeat characters in the New 52 universe, because, oh dear lord, did they make loads of people Debbie Downers in that one. I'm not kidding when I say Batman was one of the more upbeat people. Like...
And for the idea of creating new stuff like new villains or new characters for it, not many new heroes shows up as far as I remember. When it came to villain, we got such a glorious example like Relic in regards to Green Lantern, a guy that's literally from a different universe where the color, the emotional spectrum Lantern ring did not work in the way they thought they were established to be, and they thought it was a finite resource that fucked up his universe, and did not have much of an impact.
And then there's villains like Harvest from the New 52.
Cool design wasted on such bad characterization.
Yeah, especially when, okay, so at first they present him like this mysterious, all-powerful villain who has everything going according to plan, only to later reveal that, oh wait, no, actually he's a guy from the future who hates heroes because they caused the death of his son or something. So he gets heroes to be part of his death killer gang or whatever. Just so that they can be part of his team for some reason.
The Ravagers.
But then, it's time for another retcon, because it turns out he's actually the avatar of this frail guy who's hooked up to a machine who Raven was pretty much able to take out easily. And yeah, it's
kind of like with Judas Traveler during the Clone Saga. When an author tried to actually build up a villain to be a very important threat with phenomenal cosmic powers, but then because of editorial fuckery, or miscommunications or fan feedback, another author comes in and is like, actually no, this guy was just a wimp, fuck off, which is like again, I understand, overall where to come from and everything, but at the same time, I just wish that there was a bit more consistency on that, because for as absurd as it is, Judas Traveler was actually one of the things from the Clone Saga that I actually was very interested in and I enjoyed as one of its key characters, and seeing him getting fucked up like that was kind of a dick move to me.
I guess it was kind of a damned if you do, damned if you didn't, because... Well, Judas Traveler, I don't know how his starting reception was. I do know it got to a point where fans were just pretty annoyed with the guy who was just this...
It was very simple, Jova. Similar to Scryer, the guy that's supposed to be part of his cohort. They were building up for years about the mystery, and at some point...
Fancy yourself a true warrior, do you? You may be flashy with a blade, but I'm not so easily impressed. Your technique has flaws, and I'm about to show them to you.
Oh, wow, what a wonderful teacher.
Let me just finish and then I can explain how this works. But at some point, after all those years, people were starting to legitimately not caring anymore, because they believed that all we were getting is mysteries left hanging, without getting an actual resolution. You know,
And then the
it's like
actual-
if 4 years we got Five Nights at Freddy's games without any sort of actually advancement in the mysteries that they build up. Sure, again, you can still argue the execution might not have been the better one, but at least we did got answers relatively quickly and moved on to new mysteries. Because instead the Clone Saga and instead the problem of focusing on those new mysteries they introduced at the beginning and kept going and going and going just on those. That was what pissed off
And
the
then-
tournament ultimately.
And
got.
then I nearly died
Multiple times.
in the past, but I survived.
I got better.
I got better.
I still love how we can just sum up the Clone Saga now as Norman Osborn doing a little tomfoolery with a baby, essentially.
That's one thing I love about characters recounting their past, and you get to play the past level. So it's like if you constantly die, I can imagine the characters in the present thinking, "Wait, he died like
Like I
12
said,
times or something." This guy.
Prince of
Like
Persia.
you said, the problem, Prince of Persia got that idea right at best. But again, the reason
2015.
the reason this fight sucks so much is because not only this guy hits like a truck, so you're supposed to just dancing around him, doing proper, but at the same time, one of your side objective is supposed to consume him, which means using a very specific move to finish him off, essentially. But it's not really helpful when both also his bodyguards and an entire cohort of your regular Mook, jump around, and he wants to beat your ass to a pulp. So this is really one of those ultimate tests of combat that you're forced to endure. As you're about to see, I can make it, but there were actually a couple of attempts beforehand. I no joke, at one point I got stuck for a good 40 minutes in this fight alone. It wasn't pretty. There's a lot of shit that you're not seeing.
I can believe it.
But yeah, it was... Sorry, go on.
It's interesting we're talking about superhero comics. Has Lord of the Rings ever had a crossover with any superhero stuff, especially since...
Not really, and quite frankly, I perfectly find that way. When it comes to comic book adaptation, The Hobbit had one, which is based in terms of illustrations of the key ones of the book and the Rankin Bass adaptation, which includes Smaug having a goatee. Because, yeah, of course a reptilian gets to have facial hair. Don't you know? Are you fucking stupid?
Smaug is built different, I see.
I guess he's descended of Chinese dragons. Those tend to have mustaches, I guess. I don't know. No, there weren't that many comic adaptations as far as I know, and quite frankly, I don't think they really need to. It's a perfectly fine to stay like that. Not every, when it comes to connecting franchises to a larger medium, I'm perfectly more fine with the idea of, when it comes to Lord of the Rings, it stays in its own bubble, but gets to have to, get the reference to once in a while and being thrown out of the box instead of having suddenly these characters showed up here. What shenanigans can happen? No, I don't think it works even well as an isekai kind of product.
Well, as for why Smaug needed a goatee to you, well, it's to emphasize that he's evil, of course.
Of course. That's the weird thing about Smaug when you get down to it, because when it comes to the dragons, they're kind of evil. He's not even technically for conquest, dominion, or genuine dickery. They're just super greedy and super lazy because they do possess that apex predator kind of body and power. That's literally it. They were created to be evil in the Silmarillion, that's for sure. But when it came to, characters like Smaug, they got to a point they were not giving a shit. The entire point of killing Smaug was that Gandalf wanted to prevent Smaug to potentially join forces with Sauron, but in order for that to happen, Sauron was supposed to send someone to give an offering to Smaug, because otherwise he wouldn't have joined, his conquest. So there is that. Anyway, after that tedious of a mission, at least I get something a bit more interesting. Playing again the Panzer Dragoon gameplay, I need to actually intercept a couple of Karagor riders before they actually reach the inner parts of my fortress. So there is that. Pretty cool. There we go. It's actually fairly easy for you to do. So again, the difficulty jumps between missions. Sometimes you get relatively chill stuff, that are easy to get even the max rank on. But other times you do get instead difficulty spikes out of nowhere, and there's no real indication before you start the mission that you're gonna get what kind of grade of difficulty you're gonna get. Maybe that could have helped potentially. I don't know.
I got a question actually to you. I've noticed in this game there is an option to basically kick an orc out of the army.
Yes.
When is that good for use?
If you want to create a narrative where you want to legitimately have that orc as an adversary with an extra pinch, like resentment for the fact that he was kicked out of the army, potentially, or if you genuinely just don't want him and you just want to have fun. I never actually did it because I don't really need it. I prefer when it came to the orc to be as an asset, that can be used, in an occasion or another. But the option is still there. Like I said, it's kind of like the deep shaving. It has its advantages, but potentially also is the disadvantages. But the game is it's another tool that the game gives you and decides that gives you the choice to use it or not. Again, that's the key component of this game. Despite, again, the more fairly linear kind of story that it wants to tell, that you can tackle still the quest lines in your order, but it still has a story that falls in one specific direction without branching paths or multiple choices like that. When it came to the gameplay, there is a huge amount of freedom, which is usually kind of like the balance that games, especially done from this time to even this day, have to tread that kind of thin line. If you want to have a more complex photorealistic art style, very detailed locales, that have to resemble the physics and that, potentially the gameplay has to take a turn. That was the thing that apparently, gives a lot to the Callisto Protocol, for example. But instead, this game manages to both to have the cake and eat it too, and have this incredibly ingenious kind of gameplay that can take you even for hours if you're actually in the mood for it. With just the set amount of tools at your disposal, and it gives you almost complete freedom to do what you want. A bit, again, you can argue a bit like the sandbox game of the PS2 era, like GTA, but if I had to be honest, the entire reason why I was not grappled with those, because I do argue that the tools that they give you for those ones in themselves might not have been particularly interesting, at least to me, and instead most of the fun would come from using the cheat codes to do weird shit like flying, So that's something instead, like the later Saints Row games instead, entice me a bit more because they had that sandbox formula, but instead did more creative stuff with what they had. But again, that's mostly preference when it comes to that. I'm talking specifically about what can you do and what can't you do with the tools at your disposal and how the game is presented. Again, this is overall also why I'm mostly optimistic when it comes to the Wonder Woman video game, not just for what can happen in there story-wise or story-specific issue or anything, but for the kind of gameplay that can happen. If anything, I would be tempted to try to track down copies of the Fear games that this team developed and give them a try, just to see what the fun is about. I still have to try the one of the first games that they made, which is called Blood. I didn't mention it sporadically. It's basically another Doom clone with a very good voice actor as the protagonist. I forgot what he's called. He's still doing stuff to this day. If anything, that's kind of the point. He's getting cast again in a couple of recent boomer shooters like Ultra Kill or Dusk, I think. But he's really good at doing what the protagonist of this game was, Blood, which is essentially starring an undead cowboy that has to get his revenge over the people who fucked him.
Everyone in Mordor is ultimately loyal to a ring, but rings themselves have no loyalty. Their wearers and
That's a whole new meaning to the term. If you like it, then you should have put a ring on it.
Till death us do part.
Banias. Elves are the embodiment of grace. Yet we were taken with this beautiful visitor bearing gifts.
Yeah, that's also that's one of the reasons why Sauron managed to convince the different species of Middle Earth with the rings. He basically managed to play them up properly. with his trickster kind of, minor appearance, and that worked also out for the elves. Is the entire reason why Celebrimbor basically helped him on that to begin with. When it came to the rings of power given to the elves, if you forgot, because I did mention a bit in the past, ideally they gave them a bit of a boost to their already innate ability, particularly, for example, Galadriel. But when the elves started sensing that the rings of power had a problem, instead of being corrupted by Sauron, decided to actively suppress themselves and only use them in case of extreme emergencies. If I recall correctly, in the extended cut of Fellowship of the Ring, Galadriel does showcase to Frodo the ring of power that she possesses. So there is that. To the point, so basically, to give a general assessment of where things are, the rings of the elves are still with them. If Gandalf actually has one of them, complicated things that involves also him being in good relationship with Galadriel. The ones of the dwarves were had to be considered destroyed, and the ones of men, turned all of the 9 kings that they were, given to into the Nazgûl, and ultimately being servant graves of Sauron. The other species of Middle Earth were not considered important enough for Sauron to give them, so the Hobbit got shit. So,
Alas.
and again, to be fair, considering how much of an asshole kind of species they are themselves, isolated and everything in the Shire, I kind of get it to an extent. It's kind of miraculous that Bilbo and Frodo managed to be the good exceptions to the species. There we go. Although there is something that we didn't mention enough that the books do mention, but the movies, nor the Ralph Bakshi adaptation actually did mention. There is a bit of a sporadic mention of that, but not completely. When the Nazgûl are supposed to search for Frodo in the Shire, if you forgot, it's a couple of years after Bilbo departed. The movie did not convey that well. They only have, for reference, what Gollum told them, Shire and the name Baggins. The first major hobbit that the Nazgûl come into contact with is a guy called Farmer Maggot. If you forgot, in the Fellowship of the Ring movie, it's the guy to which Merry and Pippin are escaping from. The guy is just standing on his porch with his dog on his chair, just smoking his pipe weed, when basically this motherfucker, the Nazgûl, the Black Knight, shows up in front of his porch, asking me no middle terms to actually give him an address to where the Baggins live. The Farmer Maggot just gives him a good look and tells him to fuck the truck right off, unless he actually gets, I think, his scythe or shovels to actually beat him up. And then Nazgûl leaves. Again, it's one of those moments where I get the idea might have not showed up in the movie because it would have felt a bit too comedic. Maybe in a future adaptation, who knows.
Well, I mean, if Warner Brothers are planning on adapting Harry Potter again into a TV show,
like I said in a couple of different places, like also when Pedro questioned to me about a potential, animated version done in the same, style and from, the studio, if it was done around the time, the same studio that did Anna Green Gables did one of them.
Nippon Animation.
The War Masterpiece Theater, there you go.
Do you have like a Harry Potter adaptation?
No, I'm just getting to the point, Jova. I can generally think an animated series could work instead of a set of movies, depends on how each episode would be long and how many episodes per series would be encompassing the events of the movie. But I think it can work.
It's similar to... Sorry, go on.
When it comes to the Harry Potter series, Jova, it's Warner Bros. Just greenlighted a live-action one.
Oh, I know about that. Speaking of which, wasn't there a reason where that Warner Brothers have said that they are parking the series, whatever that means?
Well, that's when it comes to the movies based on, well, not based anymore, but sort of supposed to be, tied to Newt Scamander.
Yes, Wizarding World.
Adding on to that, the controversy is still surrounding. J.K. Rowling, which let's be fair, there's a very good chance that the franchise will never shake themselves out of that. I get the idea Warner Bros. Is getting the hint that it's not anymore too much of a profitable franchise. Yes, Hogwarts Legacy did still manage to sell a lot of copies, and if I had to guess correctly, because by the time we're recording this, we don't know yet the nominees. He probably still would show up at the Game Awards of 2023. We'll have to see. But I get the idea they want to play safe and not wanting to dip too much of their toes and focus on something else, like for example, A Song of Ice and Fire, which they do actually have the right. And despite the ending of Game of Thrones, so they're still managing to work things out, especially how House of the Dragons were actually better received. There is that.
Probably doesn't help that the Beast trilogy was written directly by Rowling herself.
And in general,
I mean, the third one had help.
well,
Well-
if you go on.
Gone.
Well, if you can call what happened, in terms of quality of writing and everything, actual help, because I argue it's similar to stuff like the Resident Evil Paul W. S. Anderson movie or the Jurassic World trilogy. They keep getting worse with each title. Like,
Look, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Okay, let's ignore the controversies. Let's just look at the problems with the trilogy of itself. You're trying to make Newt Scamander the linchpin in the big climactic duel between Dumbledore and Grindelwald, even though there was no mention of him being involved in that whatsoever. You're trying to make a zookeeper the chosen one. Instead of just maybe not calling the sequel,
Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah, Fantastic Beasts.
yeah, it's because marketability to go on, Pedro, yes.
Well, no, that's exactly it. The main reason why I made that suggestion regarding a Lord of the Rings TV series, because I felt that way you can put in all the details and all the cliff notes and all that, whatever it is that fans want.
And having animated style might also make it leaning more into the more comedic elements, even if you want to adopt an animated style that makes it still look.
I mean, they are making an animated movie.
Well, it's actually a Japanese animated movie based on the Roy Dreams.
Remind me,
I was very...
Yes, Pedro?
No, it's the same reason I was very excited when Anno of N.E. was about to come out, because since I only find the 85 movie okay, I felt, no, in a TV show, as demonstrated by Takahata's anime, it is a much better place to adapt this book. Which is a shame that Anno of N.E. was not interested in actually adapting the book, but...
Remind me, controversies aside, was Rings of Power confirmed to be canon to the Jackson trilogy? Or is it, like, completely its own timeline?
I think yes, because it's essentially, timeline-wise, it's set during the Second Age. But it's trying to have aesthetics that actually mirrors the one of the Jackson movies, so I think it's supposed to be set, to that. But I think, if I recall correctly, it has also its own taking some ideas. We'll have to see how things go as it continues. Anyway, tuning for the next part, where instead we continue we technically did in this part all the missions of the past of the main game. In the next part, we will do the ones of Lythiad, and while we're at it, we'll actually have to deal with Bruce's brothers while we're at it, because let's leave no stone unturned before we finish the game. See you for that.
See ya.
Alright, see ya.